If you're looking for a simple project management template that you can expand to your own needs, then this is the video for you. It's an evolution of my previous system, using it in practice and then in the end removing anything that's non-essential, with the goal to give you a foundation to build and expand up. So don't expect a lot of formulas or roll-ups except for a couple of examples to get you started. I personally use the system to capture all the information that's sent my way and to have the right information at my fingertips when I need it. Well, except for that tiny bit of information that I should have gone to the hairdresser just before the lockdown, because my hair is getting so long that people might think that this video is about yoga instructions instead of Notion. I needed this setup because I'm a freelancer and the constant switching of gears was meaning I was losing control. And a bit of real talk here, I still lose control once in a while because you can't bring your A game all the time, and that's okay. Now, a lot of people wanted me to help out, but I am only one man with two hands and I have a finite amount of time in a week. So I set up this system to take back some control and to make decisions based on data instead of a gut feeling. And that avoids me overcommitting and making sure that I can keep the promises I make to people without being stressed out. Now, I can't cover everything in this video, so I'm going to focus on the template and give a rough estimate on what the elements are for, and I will plan future videos where I'm going to dive more in depth on how these videos help. And I'm planning to make the next video about time blocking and telling people no, because that's the first way to get back time. I'm calling this template the technical superhero system, mostly because calling it Iron Man would just be asking for trouble in the future. It's based on para and the idea that there's different areas where you want to work on and you don't want to spend a lot of time switching between those areas. Another one is that I always ask myself, what would Tony Stark do?
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both?
That results into a system where I'm realistic that I can't be everywhere at the same time, but I do know what work I want to focus on and I try to automate where I can. And for that system, I use things like Outlook inbox rules, Zapier, or sometimes even simple checklists that I can give to people so they know what routine is required. For people that don't know para, it stands for projects, areas, resources, and archives, and key parts of information that you put into it. My system simplifies it a bit, but I'll put a link in the description with the original concept by Tiago Forte, so you can dive deep if you want to. Now, the idea with zoom levels is that your world is broken up into different areas and that the higher up you are, the more energy it takes to switch between zones. So it goes from the biggest one, which is live territories, to areas of responsibility, to projects. Next to that, we have information, and we're starting with the logbook, which I use to basically capture all the loose things, think meeting notes, small scratches, thought processes, anything that I just need to capture right now. And then we have resources, which is more structured. So it's a place where I have like a specific topic and then I link to other information in my system. And finally, we have context, because whatever you do, it usually involves multiple people. So knowing who's involved in what can help you a lot when doing any type of work. They are the biggest separator and they're not really part of the template, because what you actually do is you just copy the template and use one for each live territory. And the main reason for that is that it allows me to keep things completely separated, say work and personal life, for example. And for me as a freelancer, it also helps because when I start a new job, I want to start with a clean slate and I don't want to get information from one company to carry over to the next. There's a lot of rules that I have to stick by. Another reason why I want to keep these things separate is because every environment has different tool sets. So at work, it's very often something like Jira and Outlook, and my personal life, it's Gmail and Todoist. And by having separate systems with their own templates and setups, I can customize and tweak those environments to perfectly suit that part of my life. So let's get started by creating a copy to use for this demo. So I'm going to duplicate it, and that takes a while because there's a lot of elements. And then once the copy is there, we're going to go in there and give it a name. So it's going to be Technical Superhero System and then Demo for this. Now what you see here is that it starts with a lot of information, and there's a getting started guide that contains a lot of details on thought processes and what all the elements do. It's a nice reference, but here I'm going to give a demo to you guys, so you don't need it, and we're going to cut it away. So I'm going to try and select everything, use delete, and then clean it up a little bit. Then for the first bit, I'm going to look at areas of responsibility. Let's open a new one. And the main reason I have areas of responsibility is so that I can decide on what thing I am going to commit to, and it's designed around that. So let's say that this area is going to be YouTube, which is of course one of my areas of responsibility, but will suit your needs. And then you can say hours allocated. And this one's going to be part of my next video about time blocking. It just means like to be realistic in the time that you have in a week and give it a couple of hours. So let's say I'm going to say work 8 hours on YouTube every week, because I also have a job next to this. Then active projects is a roll up, and it just looks at the projects that are a subset of this area of effect and then count those up. And finally, there's a few hidden properties, tags, because I always add tags. Projects, which links to the projects that are part of this area of responsibility. Context, because every area usually has people involved that are part of that. The hours allocated we just did, the active projects, and then there's the status bar. That's the only bit of complicated formula code that we have, because if we edit, you see that it makes these graph bars, and there's only 2 icons in here. One is the crane that you see in projects. So any project that you add gets a crane added, and every hour that you set will get a clock added. And the reason why it's there is so that I can create a quick overview of what did I commit to. So like if there's lots of cranes and not many clocks, that means that I didn't allocate a lot of time, and it has a lot of projects that are active. If it shows a lot of clocks and no cranes, that means that I allocated a lot of time, but there's nothing that I'm really getting done. Both cases are like high indicators on where to get started. Now let's pick the default template. And then the default template also comes with like a little bit of tips, and the only thing under it is this project setup. And what it is, it's a filtered list that checks your projects and find out which is linked to this active project. So if I create a quick empty here, you see it disappears, and that's because it's not set to active. Now I'll do it again, and we're going to make it empty but active. And this is important for the status bit, where you really have to pick like what are you going to do. Is it actually in progress? Is it repeating? And I'm going to pick the default project and close it, and then you'll see that this crane gets added because there's one active project. And this is also something that gets reflected if we go back up to the areas of responsibility and then the dashboard, where you can see that this is showing in the status overview. Now let's dive a little deeper and head into projects. We already made an empty active project here. I'm going to open it and go through like all the properties. First I'll hide them and show you like the main properties. So the status, which is either planning, which means it's not active, you didn't commit to anything. Progress, which means it's active and running, but I hope to finish it. So it's a project that has like an end date. Yeah, these are lies I tell myself, because most projects always keep coming back once you touch something. And then there's repeat, and that happens very often if you have like a repeating thing. So for example, if you have an area which means your personal health, then a repeating project might be the set where you have to go through every week to go to the gym and sport. Or for example, when you're doing time tracking, you need to make a report every month, but there's no set end date. That's also like a repeating project. So it's good to know when something is repeating, because it's something you never get rid of. It's not something where you just put some extra effort and it stops. It's stuff that comes back. And tracking this repeating stuff is very important to be sure that you're not getting overwhelmed, because it's the repeating things that slowly but surely creep in there. Then we have the done, which is obvious. It means that you're done with the project tags, because I always add tags, and using the template, it also adds like a specific tag to know if it's in progress or repeating by default. Then you have the area of responsibility, which we just said. It says area YouTube context, because of course every project has related context. If you need more details, like what type of context or how they're related, I would recommend putting it in the text. And then we go into the properties, and then the properties show involved context, and what that does, it's a roll up. It looks at all the logbook entries that are attached to this, and then finds all the context attached to said logbook entries and shows them here. So if you have a project and you have a meeting for that project and some people show up that are not part of the project, they will show up in this involved context roll up. As said, it's an example. It's to show a few of the more advanced functions of Notion. If you're not interested in it, just remove it. Active is also a filter, but it just checks if it's in progress or repeat and then puts a marker. I use this for filters to find out which are all the active projects and for a sum up. So because it checks for this check mark, I can see how many active projects there are, which is a solution around the fact that you can say, I want to count all the projects that have the status in progress and repeat. Then day still deadline is a small calculation that's done. If you set a deadline, it will calculate how many days until said deadline. So say I put this to the 5th, then you'll see that I have 4 days till the deadline. Another piece of information that tells me like how hard I need to work on this specific project. Created a modifier, static information, and then the logbook entry is always hidden because that might add up to a lot. And that shows all the scripts, notes, meetings, anything that I made where I want to hook back to this project. Finally, this is the default template, and this one shows my GTD plan. Is something I'm going to talk about at length in another video. It's about things like why are you doing this and when is it done, and then writing down whatever you need to be doing. Description, though, I noticed that I might have started calling it Scratchpad because I've been using it mostly to get like small tidbits in that I want to sort later. A linked database that links to the logbook and filters on this specific project, so you can see all your logbook entries here, and you can also quickly add something because it's a filter. If I add like a new logbook, that logbook, and it will link back to this project, and then you can see it here, and it filters out anything that's done. So as soon as you mark out this, let me see if that's correct. No, it's not correct. So in the front view overview, if you mark it done, then it will disappear. But here, of course, you want to know all the logbook entries that are part of this project because you might need it for reference, and that's why it's sticking around. And then finally, I put a task list on the side. Now, I personally use Todoist for everything. That's what I mentioned up here. But I'm just making a spot where you can put small tasks. If you just are not looking for a really complicated solution, this is the quickest way around it. That's a regular project. Now I also have a template for repeating projects. So let's try and create one of those. I'm going to click new, show demo repeat project. And then in the templates, I'm going to pick repeat project. I'll open it as a page while we wait for Notion to load. So you can see that the status gets set to repeat. It gets added a tag, which means that it's nice in an overview. Then all the properties are the same as for a default project. So I'm going to skip that to save some time. And then you see that this has changed around a bit. There's still a description field, so you can write down what the repeating project is for. I added a few simple templates where you say like daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. So you have a spot to put things and see in what interval it is. Most repeating stuff has weekly or monthly stuff that needs to happen. And then something you might need to do once a year to wrap things up. Then the logbook, of course, is the same as for the default project, so it filters and you can create new entries that get shown here, and then the task list, which is also the same. It's very similar, of course, to a regular project, and that's by design, as that simplicity is key here. Now that we've had the zoom levels, let's dive into the information, or where you capture everything. Now let's dive into capturing everything using the information blocks, logbook, contacts, and resources. So let's start with the logbook meeting notes. In my previous system, I had like a separate system where I had like a logbook and I had meeting notes and I had different other databases. And at some point I started to notice that I was really using the logbook for everything. Even if I had like a meeting, I didn't start a meeting note because just getting to the logbook was faster and quicker. And to simplify the system, I just moved everything into one. So logbook are my meeting notes, my scratch patch, anything that I need, and it helps me get rid of a database. Let's open her up and then say logbook entry. And what we see then, I'll go to the main properties first, is that a logbook has tags, of course, because I add those to everything. Done, which is mostly meant so that I can filter it out of overviews. So say, for example, I have a daily stand-up and I tag something for the daily stand-up. Then the filter there shows everything that's tagged daily stand-up and it isn't done. And that means that during the daily stand-up, I can mention it, click it done, and then it gets away. It's also used for inbox entries. So if I quickly write something down, I know as long as I don't put that done check mark in there, it will show up in some of my filtered systems and I won't forget that I still need to do actions. Anything else there. The done is a very useful tool to make sure that I don't forget anything. Date is a calculated date that I just use to have overview. So I put like the day of the week in there and the time. And if I have a list view, I can quickly see when this was made. Context, because for meetings, of course, context is useful because then I can add who is there and then use those in a roll up to see who was related to a project. Project, because you might want to hook it up to a project. Now for the context bit, I'm just remembering, I also tried using backlinks, but backlinks are too slow. So like finding the right people or even right projects just takes a long time using backlinks. And that's why I kept the context in. Then we have modified date, and that's if you make a logbook entry, but it's one for yesterday or a meeting notes that you would put somewhere else, then you can use the modified date to pick a date where you want to put it on. And let's say I put it on the 1st, and then you can see that the date field acts accordingly. Of course, because the modified date in this case doesn't have time, it picks 12, but you can even set it to a specific time to match up. If you don't set a modified date, it will use the create on date and you don't have to think about it. At least most of the time I don't think about it at all. Then there's a couple of templates that help you along. So like meeting, coffee chat, work log, daily stand-up, and empty page. And all they really do is just fill in a few blanks. So with logbook entry, I just get an icon, I put a tag in there, some really basic stuff. I usually use these drop-down settings, the toggles, because I make most of these notes either on a mobile device or anything where I might be flexible. And then using the toggles makes it really easy to organize my data when I'm making quick notes or putting stuff up, and I can always go back and organize it later if I really need to. Now let's have a look at resources, and resources are not very complicated. If we create one, you can see that there's tags, created and last updated, which are both part of Notion, and then freshness, which is a small calculation. Well, it's pretty big in one way, but what it does is it checks how many weeks ago it was last modified, and if it's more than a week or two ago, then the stars start going down. So that gives me like an indication of like, did I work on this specific resource? But it's not really required for the system, so it's just there to show some of the features. And there's no templates, because when I use resources, it's mostly just to link up things. Say for example, Jira for me is a resource, because I have a lot of companies where I administrate that, or if people ask me questions, and then having this resource means I can link to it and I can put information here that I want to reference later. Think bookmarks to other sites, or even like copy and paste images into it, screenshots, and it's very dependent on the type of resource. Some resources get like a complete index wiki page under it with all the sub information that I need, and other ones it's just a word because I just care about the backlinks to know what they are related to. And then finally we get to contacts, and contacts are one of those things that I don't need very often, but they are super useful to have because people can't really be put under resources. That would be weird, and logbook entries definitely aren't long enough lived for contacts. So contacts, I have like a template for that one that says like default contact, but there's not much information in there, and it's definitely something you need to tweak to your own setting. Contacts can be linked to an area of responsibility. They can be linked to projects, they can be linked to logbook entries, and that shows you like the web of people around something. I put company in here. Usually everything's related to your own company, but if you work with a lot of external parties, then being able to group people by external company name is useful. It's not so useful though that I think you should really create like another table so you can cross-reference it. It's mostly that I can filter on it. Say like, hey, everybody from company X, who's that? Go to context, filter on company. And that's why I use the select down. And of course, just with everything here, it's very easy to add extra features to it. As for the entrance, this one's mostly based on my personal use of live territories where I'm talking relationships. So like who's their spouse, who do they like, you know, who are their kids, stuff like that. Important dates, wedding dates, things that are in their memory, how long they've been working at companies, gift ideas. It's to get the mind flowing on what you could write down about a person. Now this might be a bit overkill through some people, and for 90% of the people that I talk, I don't use this, but for the people that I do use it, it's to get things out of my head. When somebody says that they have a specific allergy, for example, then I start adding it to my context database, because knowing someone's allergies is super useful if you're planning to take them out for dinner sometime or if you're cooking for them. And you would be surprised how happy people are if you can actually remember those details, because they're used to repeating that over and over again. So finding someone that says like, hey, I kept track of that because I know you're vegan and I know that you can't have any nuts, and I mean that I had to pick a different dish. It's a nice way to stay in touch with people. And of course the logbook's in there, and that's just a simple filtered version that shows all the logbook entries that had this contact in it, meaning that if you talk to someone, you can quickly see any logbook entries, so any meetings they were with you. But it also works very well if you need to talk to someone about something. I usually like tag it like need to talk, and then tag it to that person, and then when I meet them I can just open this logbook and filter all the need to talk tags that aren't done, and then I know like, oh yeah, I had these 5 topics that I needed to go through with this specific person. It's there, it's useful. I don't put any contact information in the form of like addresses or emails in there. Usually those are in my Outlook or Gmail, and I just link from this to that. Else I'm just keeping track of like their phone number on 2 places, and I think that's a waste of your good time. But if you don't keep track of people anywhere else, you might want to add it here. Let's talk limits. So this template is very basic by design. That makes it easy to understand and easy to expand on, but it's also limited in scope. You will need to bring your own components to make it suit your needs. An important thing to keep in mind, and this was in my previous project management video, but you definitely need this recapping it here, is that you can change templates, but if you change the template, it doesn't affect anything you've created until that time. So I would highly recommend when you start using a system like this to start slow. Do a few projects, get a feel for it, and grow from there. And don't end up like me with 40 projects in it, everything designed, and then wanting to make a change to the template only to find out that you'll have to do it 40 times to update all the existing projects that you already have.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
This is one of my main issues with Notion, because I'm constantly growing and updating and tweaking my system, and you guys get a nice curated and clean version. But for me, switching to that clean version would just take too long a time, so I can rarely use them.
Guiding others to a treasure I cannot possess.
Finally, this template uses a lot of properties with notes. And if you've watched my video on things that you need to keep in mind before starting with Notion, I'll put a card up here, then you know that's hard to migrate to other systems. This way of working is very specific for Notion, and that's something you should keep in mind. If you want to switch to another system than Notion later time, you're probably going to need a bit more time to get that to work. I'm planning to create a few in-depth videos. One is about time blocking and telling people no. The other one is about projects and writing them in such a way that you can actually finish them. Both are pretty tough topics and they really deserve their own video. But maybe you're struggling with something completely different. And if that's the case, be sure to leave a comment down below so that I can see if I can add a video to this video series, hopefully helping you out. It's because I care about my viewers. I want to know what you need so I can add it to my series and hopefully make everyone's day a little bit better. Bonus tip for those people that are still around. While you can easily share pages in Notions, which is something I do for projects all the time, sometimes you just want to make some private notes or something that you don't want to share because it's still rough. And one of the things that I do is I just create a subpage, go into that page and unshare it. And that means that I am the only person that can see it. Other people will still see like an untitled page in the top shared page, but they don't know what it's for. Be a bit careful though if you're sharing it and they have write access, as they might accidentally delete the page and then you have to recover it. It just is a bit of a hassle. In that case, I would highly recommend putting the page somewhere else and just linking to it so you don't lose that valuable information. Be sure to watch other videos over here, and if you learned something, be sure to like, subscribe, or really help me out by sharing this video with someone else. That goes a long way in YouTube. Remember, you're awesome. Keep it up.